Right then, what's up? Welcome back to the channel. I'm Paul. Today we're going to look again at 3 fighters to look out for this weekend. So there's no major MMA happening, well, none in the UFC anyway. Not a real UFC card. There's one of those very apexy UFC cards. It's one of those that just seems to be an exercise in getting fighters fights to tick them off their contracts. There's nothing there of any real value, nothing with much riding on it. So we're going to just turn our eyes away from that and we're going to look towards European MMA. There's a couple of real high value cards happening in Europe this weekend. Oktagon is happening, Cage Warriors is happening in London. Some cracking fights made up. So let's look at three fighters you got to keep an eye out for this weekend. Number 1, we're going to look at Losene Keita, the Black Panther. He is fighting in the co-main event at Oktagon 59 this weekend in Bratislava. He's up against Predrag Bogdanovic, who is, I think, 16-1, solid record. Maybe hasn't fought the kind of level of opponents that Keita has faced just yet, but you know, he could prove to be a stiff test and it'll give us a really good idea of where Keita is at the moment. If you haven't seen Keita before, a little bit about his background. He's a Belgian fighter, born in Guinea, I believe, but he is 8-1 inside the Oktagon banner. He's been with them for quite a long time. He's held belts in 2 weight classes, so he did hold a lightweight belt. The featherweight belt he fought first for, and he broke his leg, I believe, during that fight. So he was out for a little while, came back a few months later and actually won that belt then. So he remains the featherweight champion, although that belt is not up for grabs. I think this weekend he's fighting in the quarterfinals of the Title Sport $1 million tournament. So he is not putting his belt on the line, but it's a big fight regardless because he's got a very tough opponent in front of him. He, as I said, is 8-1 inside the promotion so far, but he's taken out some decent names on the European scene. Guys like Samuel Bark, who's a fantastic Muay Thai style fighter. Ivan Bushinger, who's around a long time. He's fighting with Oktagon a lot over the last few years. Fought Conor McGregor in Cage Warriors way back when. And he has also beaten Agi Sadari, another former Cage Warriors veteran. So he's got some big names on his record. He's taken out a lot of guys. Keita did become a free agent earlier this year around the same time that Paul Hughes did, and we remember there was a big public fuss about it. Paul Hughes made it public that he was going to be a free agent and all of the biggest promotions in the world were after him. Keita, I believe, was the same, and he says he's turned down a few offers from the UFC over the past few years. He sees the opportunity to build something big here with Oktagon, and maybe he'll reach a point where the UFC will break the bank to sign him, rather than, you know, what they're doing at the moment is they're signing prospects via the Dana White Contender Series route, aren't they? So with that comes a better deal financially for the UFC, but not for the fighter. So I think Keita is playing the long game here. He's opted to re-sign with Oktagon after 9 fights in the promotion already. He sees his immediate future there, but he has said that he wants to get to the UFC further down the line. He is a very fast and aggressive striker. He likes to get on the front foot. Very, very dynamic, very sharp. He's aggressive. He cuts off the cage very well. It'll be interesting to see how this one plays out. Bogdanovic, no knockouts in his career so far, whereas Keita, I think, has 8 so far, 8 knockouts or TKO finishes. So he's certainly got the power advantage coming into this matchup. Bogdanovic will be looking to make the fight ugly, get a hold of Keita and take him away from areas where he can do damage with his striking, his speed, his athleticism. They're his greatest attributes, Keita. So he's going to be a real threat on the feet. So you're going to see him try to keep the fight standing, keep the fight where they're taking place there, and do his damage from there. So very interesting fight to look out for. This guy could be a guy you see in the UFC further down the line, so don't miss out on this one. The second fighter we're going to look at is Gheorghe Harris. Now, I'll be fully honest here and fully transparent. Gheorghe Harris is a teammate, a training partner, and a friend of mine, so I might be a little bit biased here. But he's facing the toughest fight of his career against Joanny Scott. They square off at Cage Warriors 174 in London this Saturday night. And that card is looking sensational. If you're a follower of all things Cage Warriors, this is one of the strongest offerings they've put together in a long time. And they do put together some fairly beefy cards with, competitive matchups with things riding on them. The things that have happened in the flyweight division in Cage Warriors recently have sort of elevated this fight to, a fight of great importance within that bracket. So the champion has just pulled out. He was due to be headlining, Shajhak was due to be headlining the card this weekend against Nicolas Leblanc. Shajhak is a very, very impressive fighter. He's around a long time. I think he's in his early 30s, Shaj, but he's around a hell of a long time fighting in flyweight, bantamweight divisions all around Europe. He had an amazing display in his title defense against Michele Martignoni last summer, and I was looking forward to seeing him in action here against Nicolas Leblanc, who has been finishing fighters non-stop on his rise through the Cage Warriors flyweight division. Hack is out and Leblanc has been paired off with a new opponent. He's going to fight for the interim flyweight belt against Amir Malikpour. So, with that fight taking place there at the top of the card, a flyweight fighter, another flyweight fight taking place on the card is obviously really good timing. If you get an impressive finish here, you could be looked at as maybe one of the next guys to come into that title conversation. Now, the fact that Lonier Kavanagh, who is probably the biggest flyweight prospect in the promotion, has been signed to fight on the Contender Series, that's kind of placed this fight between Ger Harris and Joanne Scott in a brilliant place. So the winner here, if either of these guys was to come out of it with a very impressive performance and victory, you got to be able to put your hand up in that case to be the next guy in line to fight for the belt, or for that number one contender fight at least. So they are in a good spot. Ger is 5-1 in his career and Joanne is 4-1. So Ger I know very well. He's at his last two fights in the Cage Warriors promotion. Last summer he picked up I think it was last October, he picked up his first victory for Cage Warriors in his debut. He beat the brakes off Ryan Hewitt for 3 rounds, looked sensational, dominated the fight. Now Ryan Hewitt is one of those guys that you could punch him in the head all day and all night. He's not going anywhere. So we really got to see how Ger Harris handled that type of situation. If you unload a lot of shots early on somebody and they're still there, sometimes that can prove troublesome for a fighter. But Ger dealt with it very well. He stayed consistent, slowed down a little bit, and just began to be a little more patient as the fight went on, when he sort of realised the guy was going to be in there for the whole thing. And he got to display a lot of his arsenal, and he does have a wide variety of weapons, particularly in the stand-up. He's a very diverse type of striker, and we got a good sight of his technical abilities there. He then fought against an experienced competitor, Gregory Wamitan, in April in Dublin, and that was a super impressive victory because he didn't really have a great performance. He's kind of admitted himself, and Wamitan's wrestling, his grappling, was making life very difficult for Harris. So what Wamitan was doing was taking him down and just trying to grind out the decision. That guy is a dangerous submission artist, but he was looking to wear Harris down and just take him away from the striking game, which has served him so well. And what we saw was Harris pulled off the 3rd submission victory of his pro career. So he pulled off a beautiful ninja choke, got a highlight reel victory to his name. He'll be hoping for maybe a better display this time around, but his ability to finish a fight anywhere, it's really impressive. He's a guy, when you watch him fight, he looks like he's predominantly a striker, although in his pro career he's still searching for that first knockout or TKO victory. He's finished 3 by submission. He got a beautiful armbar in the Anthony Pettis FC promotion just over a year ago, and then prior to that, I can't remember which promotion was, but he pulled off a submission victory in one of his early pro bouts. So he's dangerous wherever the fight goes on the mat, but he does want to keep things on the feet, and he loves to strike with guys, and he'll get the chance here against Joanne Scott. Now, this guy is a fighter that I also know very well because I had the pleasure of commentating on his last fight before he signed with Cage Warriors. So he's had one fight in Cage Warriors, and prior to that, I think it was last November, I commentated when he fought for Brave Combat Federation over in Tenerife against Ubay Gonzalez, and it was up a half a weight class. It was a catch weight of 59 kilos, and what we got to see really, really stylish electric boxing, great footwork. Joanne took 5 years off in between the end of his amateur career and the beginning of his pro career, and he focused a lot on amateur boxing, so he had quite a lot of competition experience there. His hands are very good, he's very, very quick, his footwork is excellent. But what we also got to see then in his last fight was just how he combines really good wrestling, and he's a really good natural athlete. You can tell by the way he moves, and he's got good takedowns. He got in very well. I think it was a double leg. He got to the hips of Ubay Gonzalez against the fence. Really impressed me. His Cage Warriors debut was very, very impressive. He had a a questionable first round where he wasn't really able to get his footing. There was something going on with his feet and he was sliding all over the place. They sorted it out in between rounds, and he came out and he dropped his opponent at the beginning of the second, took his back, and he got the rear naked choke. So for me, these guys look like they're insanely well matched. I think it's going to be very, very difficult to separate them, to pick a winner between the two. It's going to be a case of which fighter can implement his game plan, or which fighter can perform to the best of his capabilities on the night. I think if they fought maybe 10 times, you might be seeing each guy winning, quite a few fights, over those 10 fights. So it's going to be a very closely contested one, but whoever wins this lands in a brilliant position. Two really exciting prospects. They're going head to head here to see who moves forward in the flyweight division in Cage Warriors, and that division is stacked top to bottom with absolute killers. So if you can climb your way to the top of that, it's like a bucket of crabs. If you can get your way to the top while the rest of them are trying to pull you back down, you're doing quite well. One more fighter we're going to look at is also on that Cage Warriors card. He's making his debut with the promotion, and he's a fighter again I know quite well. If you follow me on social media, you'll remember at the beginning of the year I posted a clip counting 5 Irish fighters who were about to make their professional debuts this year and ones to watch out for. And Gheorghe Grozav, or Gheorghe Grozav is his real name, but Gheorghe we all know him by, he was in the mix for sure, and he's a fighter I've been blown away by. I've been lucky to commentate on all of his amateur fights. He's had one pro fight so far, he's 1-0, but since the middle of his amateur career and onwards, he's now on a 7-fight winning streak. He's taken out some of the best names on the amateur scene in Ireland before turning pro. He had a very, very impressive submission victory in his pro debut at Cage Legacy 20 in February. He's got a really difficult fight in front of him in London on Saturday night. He's going to be taking on Tommy Brunning on Cage Warriors 174. Now, Tommy is also 1-0, but another guy who had a very, very impressive amateur career. He was unbeaten throughout, and he got his pro career off to a good start in March at Cage Warriors 169 with a first round stoppage over Kevin Cesari. So a really tough fight for Gheorghe Grozav, and for me, I think he has everything in his locker to go all the way in this game. He's a really strong. He came into his amateur career as a guy who had sensational wrestling, but had to kind of fill in the holes in his game, and he has sure done that. He works hard, and he's now rounded out his skill set. He looks fast, sharp, electric on the feet. I've moved around on the mat with the guy. I've rolled with him, and he is just so tricky. I mean, you'll think you're doing well against the guy. You'll think you've got everything under control, and all of a sudden he's on a submission out of nowhere. So he is dangerous, And I think, again, this is one of those fights, whoever comes out on top of this one, they're going to count this as a great win going forward. I think in a few years, when you look back on this fight, whoever comes out with that victory will be able to point at it and go, yeah, look how that guy's career turned out, and I got a win over him. So yeah, Gheorghe Grozav, check out him if you haven't seen him before. Cage Warriors 174 goes down Saturday night. It's going to be on Fight Pass, and Oktagon, of course, you'll find that on DAZN. A couple of really good prospects, those 3 guys coming out of European MMA. For sure you're going to see a couple of those guys in the UFC further down the line. Enjoy the fights this week, guys. Take it easy. Good luck.